If you haven't had enough, and I know I haven't, Spencer will be performing here at the International Storytelling Center from Tuesday through Saturday. So I surely hope you already have your tickets because his performances always sell out.
I know I will definitely be going. I also know where we all are going to be going next. Looks like it's back out into the country.
Well, I thought it was a town story. Which is it?
Well, I'm from where the country and town met. I lived in a mining town, but the amenities were few, so it was more like country living. We had a one-room house with a hang-down light and a wood floor that had gaps in it, so when winter came, it would blow up the rug Mama had put down to cover them. There was a common pump for water that we all used to fill our pails to take back to the kitchen, which didn't have running water. Newspapers said coal was making people rich, but we never saw any of it. I never even saw real money till I got older, because Daddy got paid in scrip. That's currency created by the mining company. You could only spend it at the company store, which had food, clothes, and household needs at prices the company decided on. Even as a child, I didn't see how that was right.
I went to work in the mines after 5th grade so my family could stay in the company housing after my dad died back home. My younger brother and sisters got to go to high school. I'm glad of that. I wish I'd gotten a chance, but you make sacrifices for your family.
Now, I will say generations of families have been able to earn a living in the coal fields of Southwest Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. But these were hard-fought living. By the time I was older, miners had gotten some rights and some benefits and were paid in real money. My husband made $600 a week and had medical benefits and a retirement plan.
That was hard-fought too, and didn't last as long as we thought. The good times with full rights only lasted maybe 30 years. Clinchfield had been mining the area for nearly 100 years. The easy coal was gone, and getting the rest cost the coal companies more money.
Some of the new ways they mined was like this. I lived in a house that had a mountain on the north side and a mountain on the east side. I still live in that house, but the land all around it is black now.
That kind of mining took more money. A new contract advocated by Pittston would sharply reduce our benefits because the number of retirees was growing. The price of coal was dropping, and we were expendable, or that's how they were treating us.
But after years of being treated badly and after having a small taste of what it was to be treated right, the miners didn't want that taken away again.
Pittston miners in Virginia and West Virginia walked out. We were paid by the Union Strike Fund, built up by monthly contributions of working and retired miners. We put up picket lines and assigned shifts and places to picket. It was very organized and orderly.
I was a teacher at the Clinch Cove School in Dickinson County, the very middle area of the strike. What was really newsworthy was the heavy participation of women and even children who supported the miners. Meals were prepared. A large tent city went up at the Russell County Fairgrounds near Castlewood, Virginia. Miners and families gathered, working together to see that everyone was warm and fed, and miners from other areas had a place to sleep and to bathe. A solidarity suggestion was made to wear camouflage to help identify the miners. Immediately, we saw camo on most of our students, whether or not their families were miners. They saw the union as their protection against big coal. Parents picked their children up at school and took them to the meetings and dinners set up at various locations. Several of my students said it was the first time that they were ever out of the county. Miners and their supporters who were arrested for sit-ins were seen as heroes and heroines. The enormously successful rolling blockades on the narrow two-lane highway slowed down the coal trucks' ability to move coal from the mines to the tipples. One of those was planned to go right down the road in front of the school. The students all wanted to go out there and show their support. So did the principal. He canceled school after lunch, and everyone went down to cheer the rolling blockade. It took them an hour to pass our driveway. The union finally got their demands, but the costs were everywhere. Mines were shut down. Truckers went out of business. All the businesses in these towns were to serve the mines or the truckers, and they all closed. Schools consolidated. Even now, decades later, the unions are fighting the coal companies to bar the bankruptcy courts from dropping the retired and disabled pensions and insurance plans.
There's no single cause. Coal is fading. Communities that have spent over 100 years tied to the industry, we see the writing on the wall. We all lost something in the strike, no matter what side of the picket line you were on. We lost something we'll never get back, something we won't be able to hold on to very much longer. Standing on my flat land with nothing to obstruct my view, I can see that. Wish I could do something to change it. But what can one person do?
This is a story about one man's action and how it came back and spoke generations later. My granddaddy came up hard in Harlan County, Kentucky, a mining town. Lived in company housing, paid in company scrip, which kept him there. In April of 1928, he went to get his pay, and the script writer said no. This was back in the Hoover days. He didn't need a reason to say no. Granddaddy yelled about injustice, about working hard for barely nothing, and now for nothing at all. The scriptwriter beat him with a pick handle, then pulled a gun and shot Granddaddy in the leg, just to teach him a lesson. But Granddaddy carried a gun too, and he got the best of the shootout. My daddy was with him, witness to it at 10 years old. It was an early lesson on winning the hard way. Now, it did start out as self-defense when Granddaddy fired the first shot. That's the truth of it. But 3 bullets later, there wasn't much left to defend against. And by the 6th bullet, it was just Granddaddy emptying out the rage he had about the pay, about work, about being in bondage to this company who also owned the judge in Granddaddy's trial. Even if it was self-defense, Granddaddy went to jail. And his son, my daddy, went to work the mines because nobody else could afford to take care of him. You might think that's the end of this story, and it could be if that was the story I was telling, but it's not. 30 years later, Dad's married with 9 children, still mining. There's no such thing as OSHA to control hazards. He's lost 3 fingers from accidents on the job and still works, but it's getting harder because he can't get enough air. Black lung. It is what it sounds like. His lungs have turned black and there's no cure. All he can do is be someplace where he won't breathe more dust to make it worse. He retires from the mine. The company kicks us out of housing the same day. We followed the trail from Appalachia to uptown Chicago because we heard there were jobs. There were, all hard labor. Dad tried one after another, but his lungs were so thick that he couldn't work and breathe at the same time. He tried to file a claim with Social Security, but the person said no. Wouldn't allow him to file. Didn't give him a reason why, and though she didn't carry a pick handle, he began to understand what Granddaddy felt that day in the scriptwriter's office. He walked out, knowing he was continuing a job that Granddaddy didn't finish. COBLA had recently formed Chicago Area Black Lung Association. People banded together to help each other with claims. Dad didn't think he'd live long enough to get a claim, but he worked for this organization, believed in the good it was doing for his people. Barely able to breathe, he climbed 3 flights of steps because a man up there might need benefits. COBLA found lawyers like Jim Chapman to study up on the law and to hold hearings. Letters and proof affidavits were written for folks who had worked records in the mines. They gathered information and laid the material on the desk of Social Security, knowing they had all the information the law required to make the claims. The Social Security agent said no once again. If I'm starting to sound repetitive, imagine how these people felt who were only trying to get what was entitled to them. But Social Security gave reason this time. They needed more data. Miners came back with that data, and the rules changed again. COBLA organized an event for the mining community. Lawyers were slated to speak and convince everyone to join the fight, but they were late to the event. To keep people there, Dad and Mom sang traditional mountain songs, and then Dad told stories about the coal fields. By the time the lawyers arrived, no one needed convincing. This storytelling, this pride and heritage, ignited something in the families who'd listened to him that day. They were ready to demand legislative changes. You have to understand, the idea was to ask the federal government to take responsibility, to protect and compensate minors, to win amendments to the law. Before this, not even one claim had ever been won. Dad scheduled a people's public hearing and got Congressman Yates to come. He'd never made a speech in public, except for storytelling. But Kabla asked him to be their spokesperson because he'd influenced so many. Dad had a hearing aid, speech difficulty from breathing, clawed hands, and huge, thick accent. He knew he'd be laughed at and prepared for it. Then he spoke.
There is a terrible lack of help. The Social Security rules are designed to force people to drop claims. Doctors are making prejudicial statements against minors. We have other doctors who counter-testified against these terrible diagnoses, and we still can't get the help we need. Politicians are walking around on some rainbow cloud, while the jewel of this country, the working people, struggle just to breathe. While some of us have died, gasping their last breath, without any benefits.
No one laughed. Even the politicians he attacked sat riveted. The men from the coal fields wept to have someone speaking for them. The lawyers spoke next and named their demands. Every demand made at that hearing was won. They became amendments to the law which led to OSHA. After that hearing, this ex-miner, scrap metal junker from uptown Chicago became a national spokesman and lobbyist for the rights of miners. I wish I could tell you that was the end of the story, but it's not. My granddaddy had shed blood. Back home we have a saying that bloodshed is answered by bloodshed. Daddy spent the years of his life doing right for himself and made life easier for a lot of people he didn't even know. He was a good man. But blood crimes run deep, and sometimes it takes a generation or two to come back and answer itself. I was the answer. See, another thing that Dad did was work hard to get Harold Washington elected. Washington held a lot of the same beliefs Dad did, but he wouldn't run unless so many African American voters registered. Dad took me with him, wheezing all the way to registered voters. Southern whites campaigning for Washington, who was black. There's another group that was around for that election period. We were being called every rude name that you can think of by this group. They shamed me as I walked down the street. These guys know how to appeal to people, especially unemployed young white people. Man, you're white. Some black guy has your job. I was poor and mad and carried my granddaddy's temper. And I believed them when they promised me a job and a better life. I shaved my head, went with them to a few rallies. But it wasn't like the rallies I'd been to with my dad. It wasn't about justice and rights. It was about oppression. It was what I'd been fighting against with my daddy since I could remember. I broke off from them. I went home to see my father. That's when I was shot in the back of the head and killed. Rumors went out that a black man did it. Whether to stir up racial fights or to take the heat off them, I'm not sure. But it was them, the neo-Nazis. My dad and mom, in their terrible grief, didn't want this to damage the election. They put out a leaflet telling the truth about what happened to their son. Harold Washington came to the funeral, and so did the Nazis. They marched right through. My family didn't give them what they wanted, their bloody fight at the funeral, putting more blood on more hands. He was furious and grief-stricken, but as far as Daddy was concerned, this is where the bloodshed would end for his line. One man's action had come back and spoken to another generation, and it was answered. There was pain, and there was relief, because Daddy knew that he too was one man, knew he did right in the world, and looked forward to the day where his actions would come back and speak for him. And that is the end of the story.
One person can make a difference.
One person can make a stand.
One person can have a voice.
One person can rewind.
One person can take action.
One person can step forward.
One person can listen.
One person can have love.
One person can have the courage to boldly go where no man is going.
One person can sing out.
One person can feed others.
One person can have kindness.
One person can have hope.
One person stands, and then another, and another. And in time, a circle begins to form. A circle of light, a circle of courage, a circle of hope. The stories you heard tonight aren't simply stories for this evening's program. These stories are the stories of our circle of life, interweaving, never-ending, and hopefully ever expanding.
Thank you so much for tuning in tonight and being a part of our circle.
Thank you.